All right, so are you curious about Joby Aviation?
Yeah, it's a really fascinating company.
People want to know, is this a good investment?
Well, they're certainly making a lot of noise in the market with this whole EVTOL thing.
Yeah, and I mean,
Looks like.
it's pretty crazy to think about, right? Like flying taxis,
It sounds like science fiction, but they're actually building and testing these
it's
things.
pretty wild. And they've got some big names backing them, too.
Oh, absolutely. You've got Delta, you've got Toyota. Even the U.S. Air Force is interested.
Yeah, I still can't get over the fact that the GorillaPod guy is running an air taxi company.
You mean Joe Ben Bevert, the CEO? Yeah.
Yeah, him.
It's quite a story,
So
actually.
tell me about that.
He didn't start out in aviation.
Yeah.
He was actually in the world of photography gadgets.
Really?
Yeah, he invented the GorillaPod, that flexible tripod that you can wrap around anything.
Oh, wow, okay.
But he's always been obsessed with flight, and he actually patented an EVTL design way back in 2008.
Wow, so this isn't just some, like, flash in the pan idea for him.
No, this has been a long-term vision for him.
Okay, that's interesting. So what's their game plan? Like, how are they actually trying to make money with this?
So their core product is the S4.
Okay.
It's this sleek, all-electric aircraft that can take off and land vertically.
So like an electric helicopter?
Kind of, but quieter and more efficient.
Okay.
And their main goal is to launch an air taxi service.
Okay, so I book a flight on my phone, hop into an S4, and zoom over all the traffic.
Exactly.
That's the idea.
You get to your destination in a fraction of the time.
Okay, so are they just targeting, like, impatient commuters with this, or do they have other markets in mind?
Well, commuters are a big part of it, especially in congested cities like New York or LA.
Right.
But they're also thinking bigger than that.
Okay.
They're exploring applications for emergency medical services, cargo delivery, and even military operations.
Oh, wow.
Remember that $131 million contract they secured with the Department of Defense?
Yeah.
That's a pretty big vote of confidence.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Delta earlier. What's the deal with that partnership?
So they're aiming to integrate Joby's air taxi service into Delta's existing network.
Interesting.
So imagine you land at JFK and you need to get to your hotel in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Instead of waiting for a taxi or dealing with traffic, you just hop into a Joby and you're there in minutes.
Okay, so it's like a seamless connection from your flight to your final destination.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool. All right, so we've talked about the GorillaPod guy. We talked about the aircraft. What about the rest of the leadership team? Who else is calling the shots at Joby?
Well, besides Joe Ben Bevert, the management team has a pretty solid background in aviation and operations.
Okay.
Bonnie Simi, the president of operations, for example, has over 25 years of experience in the airline industry.
Oh, wow.
She's held leadership roles at JetBlue and Alaska Airlines.
Okay, so they've got some industry veterans on board. That's good. But what about their financial situation?
Yeah,
They're still pre-revenue, right?
they are.
Are they just burning through investor cash at this point?
Well, they've raised over $2 billion in funding, so they're certainly spending a lot of money on R&D testing and building out their manufacturing capabilities with Toyota.
Yeah.
Their burn rate is pretty high, but they still have a decent cash reserve.
Okay, so they're spending a lot, but they have some cushion.
Right.
How long can that last, though? I mean, at some point, they need to start bringing in some revenue.
Absolutely. And that's why their projected market entry in 2025 is so crucial.
All right, so let's talk numbers. We know Joby is still pre-revenue, but what can their financials tell us about their path to profitability?
Well, it's a little bit like trying to predict the future with tea leaves, right? But there are some clues we can look for. Their burn rate, for example, was about $144 million in the third quarter of 2024.
Okay, and that's basically how much cash they're chewing through every 3 months.
Exactly. It's a hefty sum, but they still have a decent cash runway with over $710 million in cash and short-term investments.
So they've got some breathing room, but they can't keep burning cash at that rate forever.
No, definitely not.
Ah.
What's crucial is their projected market entry, which is currently slated for 2025.
Okay, so that's when they're aiming to launch their air taxi service.
Right, and if they can pull that off, especially in major markets like New York City and Los Angeles, they could start generating significant revenue.
Okay, but 2025, that's like right around the corner.
Yeah, the clock is ticking.
What are the major hurdles they need to clear between now and then?
Well, first and foremost, they need to secure final FAA certification.
Right, that's like the golden ticket for any aviation company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's expected sometime in 2025, but regulatory processes can be notoriously slow and unpredictable.
Oh, yeah, for sure. He's like trying to get a permit to build a treehouse in a city park.
Uh-huh, exactly. The paperwork alone could take years.
So FAA approval is a big one.
Right.
What else?
Well, then there's the challenge of scaling up production with Toyota. Remember, Joby isn't just designing these aircraft, they're building a whole new manufacturing system from scratch.
Right, they need to be able to churn these things out if they're going to meet demand.
Exactly. And then finally, there's the whole challenge of convincing the public to actually use these air taxis.
Yeah, it's one thing to build a cool flying machine, but it's another thing to get people comfortable with the idea of hopping into one.
Absolutely. There are concerns about safety, noise pollution, even privacy.
Oh, yeah. I remember reading about that lawsuit filed against Volocopter's project for the Paris Olympics because of noise complaints.
Yeah, exactly. Public perception could make or break them.
For sure. So what's the overall sentiment among investors? Are people buying into the Joby hype?
Well, it's interesting. Despite the risks and the fact that their pre-revenue market sentiment seems cautiously optimistic.
Okay, so people are willing to bet on Joby. What's driving that optimism?
Well, the eVTOL market itself is a major draw. It's seen as a potential game changer for transportation, and Joby is considered a front runner.
Okay.
They've got a track record, a solid team, those crucial partnerships we talked about, and they've already demonstrated their technology and secured those early-stage FAA approvals.
This is showing they can execute.
Exactly.
Okay, but what about the naysayers? Who's betting against Joby?
Well, some investors are shorting the stock, essentially betting that the price will go down.
Okay.
And their main concern is execution risk. Can Joby really deliver on their ambitious plans? Can they overcome those regulatory hurdles, scale up production, convince the public that air taxis are safe, reliable, and worth the price?
Yeah, those are all valid concerns. It's that age-old dilemma, high risk, high reward.
Exactly.
Speaking of which, who are the big players backing Joby? Who owns a piece of the pie?
That's an important question. You always want to know who's betting on a company's success.
Yeah, for sure.
In Joby's case, there's significant institutional ownership with giants like BlackRock and Vanguard holding large chunks of stock.
Ah, the big institutional investors. They tend to have a lot of influence. What about insider ownership? Are the people running the show also financially invested in Joby's success?
Absolutely. Insider holdings are pretty high. CEO Jobin Bever owns a substantial portion of the company, which is generally seen as a good sign. It suggests his interests are aligned with those of other shareholders.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about Joby's business model, their management, their financials, market sentiment, and even ownership structure. But now it's time to face the elephant in the room. The risks.
Yeah, we've hinted at some of them, but let's really break them down.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, a good way to do that is to use a tool called a SWOT analysis.
A SWOT analysis.
Yeah, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Think of it like a comprehensive checkup for the company.
Okay, I like it. Let's get into it. What are Joby's biggest strengths?
Well, one of their most significant strengths is their head start in the regulatory game. They've been working closely with the FAA for years and have already achieved some key milestones, like those early-stage certifications we mentioned earlier. Those are a big deal.
So they're ahead of the pack when it comes to navigating those bureaucratic hurdles.
Yeah.
That's got to be a huge advantage in an industry where regulations can make or break you.
Oh, absolutely. And then there's that powerhouse partnership with Toyota. Wow. It's not just about the investment. Toyota brings world-class manufacturing expertise to the table, which is crucial for scaling production and keeping costs under control.
Yeah, Toyota's known for its lean manufacturing and efficiency. They've built millions of cars. They know how to do this stuff. What else is going well for Joby?
Well, their financial situation is relatively strong. They've raised billions in funding and have a substantial cash reserve, giving them the resources to weather potential storms and invest in growth.
So to recap the strengths, they're ahead on regulations, they've got a strong manufacturing partner, and they have a good chunk of change in the bank. But every company has its weaknesses. Where does Joby need to improve?
Well, the most obvious weakness is that they're still pre-revenue. Yeah. There's no guarantee their air taxi service will be successful, and they're burning through cash while trying to get there.
Yeah, it's like they're building a rocket ship while it's already in flight.
Yeah.
It's impressive, but nerve-wracking.
Exactly. And they're heavily reliant on FAA certification, which, as we said, can be unpredictable. Any delays or setbacks could push back their launch date and impact their financial projections.
Yeah, it's like waiting for a building permit that never comes through. What other weaknesses should we be aware of?
Scaling up production and building the necessary infrastructure is a huge undertaking. They need to ramp up manufacturing trained pilots, establish a network of vertiports, and iron out all the logistics of running an air taxi service.
Right.
It's a complex operation with a lot of moving parts, which means a lot can go wrong.
Okay, so weaknesses, pre-revenue status,
Right.
dependence on regulatory approvals, and the sheer complexity of scaling up operations. Now let's look at the bright side. What opportunities are out there for Joby?
Well, the eVTOL market itself is a massive opportunity. It's projected to grow exponentially in the coming decades.
Wow.
If Joby can establish itself as a leader, the potential is enormous.
It's like being at the forefront of the internet boom in the 90s. But what's their edge? How can they capture that potential?
Their partnerships could be key here. Collaborating with companies like Delta and Uber could give them access to huge customer bases and help them integrate their air taxi service into existing transportation networks.
Okay.
Imagine booking a Joby through the Uber app or earning Delta Sky Miles for your air taxi ride.
Right.
It's about creating a seamless experience.
Right. It's all about convenience. They need to make it easy for people to choose an air taxi over a car or a traditional flight. What about expanding into new markets?
That's another big opportunity. There's a growing global demand for innovative transportation solutions, and Joby could capitalize on that by expanding beyond their initial target markets.
So lots of potential for growth.
Yeah.
But of course, there are always threats. What could rain on Joby's parade?
Competition is a big one. There are a number of other companies developing eVTOL aircraft, some with significant funding and momentum. It's a crowded space.
Yeah, it's not a one-horse race.
Yeah.
What else could pose a threat to Joby's success?
Technological disruption is always a possibility in a fast-moving industry like this. What if a new, more efficient battery technology comes along and makes Joby's aircraft obsolete? Or what if another company comes up with a completely different approach to urban air mobility that makes eVTOLs look like yesterday's news?
Yeah, it's like the rise of smartphones. Nobody saw that coming, and suddenly flip phones were dinosaurs.
And we can't forget about economic factors. A global recession or a spike in oil prices could make investors nervous and reduce consumer demand for air taxis, especially in the luxury market they're targeting.
So even if they overcome the technological and operational hurdles, they still have to navigate the unpredictable world of economics. And speaking of unpredictable, what about public acceptance?
Ah, yes, that's the wild card. Will people actually feel safe riding in these air taxis? Will they be willing to pay a premium for this type of transportation?
Right.
Those are questions only time can answer.
It reminds me of the early days of the internet. People were hesitant to trust online shopping or share their personal information online. It took time for those behaviors to become mainstream.
Exactly. So there you have it. Joby's SWOT analysis shows a company with clear strengths, but also significant challenges. It's a classic high-risk, high-reward scenario. So what does this all mean for potential investors?
Well, is Joby Aviation a buy, a sell, or a hold? Give us the bottom line.
If you're risk-averse, Joby's probably not for you. They're pre-revenue, they're burning cash, and there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding their future.
Okay.
But if you believe in the long-term potential of the eVTOL market and you think Joby is well-positioned to be a leader, then it might be worth considering a calculated gamble.
So a bit of a gamble, but potentially a big payoff.
Exactly.
All right, so as always, folks, do your own research, understand the risks, and don't invest more than you can afford to lose. This is just our deep dive into the research and AI-powered analysis of Joby.
Right. It's not financial advice.
Nope. And while you're there, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We're always diving deep into the most interesting companies and industries, so you won't want to miss what we have coming up next.
See you in the next deep dive.
Until then, happy investing.